Okay, hi, it's Anthony. This is the Anthony DeCecco podcast, and called Confessions of a Reluctant Tennis Pro. Today we are going to talk about modern day tennis addiction, which is the today's incarnation of a tennis club that was built in 1972. So what do you think? We talk about this a little bit, Rosie?
I think so, yeah. I mean, when we left off last time, Anthony, you had just kind of talked to the bank or something, and then you were going to take over the lease. But how did you get from like working there to, to deciding to take over the lease and eventually own it?
Yeah, so the first part of it was when the previous owner who just owned the business, when he left, it was an opportunity for me to move in, or really stay in the club that I was in, and that I built up the tennis program. And I kept the gym, we stayed, and we decided, we had to name it another business, and I'd already incorporated Tennis Addiction Sports Club. So, and everybody.
And how did you come up with that name?
Everybody likes that name. Well, I mean, it became the name. We accidentally came up with it, just out having a few drinks one night. A friend of mine came up with Tennis Addiction, and we thought, hey, that's pretty cool. And then Sports Club was my accountant used that name when he incorporated. So that's the technical name of it. But we really just go by TA, Tennis Addiction, and it's become so well known now that people are like, that's the perfect name. But it kind of worked backwards. At the beginning, we didn't pick it saying, okay, this is going to reflect our business. We thought it was a cool name, but now it's turned into a perfect name because people just keep coming in every day.
It is a cool name, and you really, every time I think about it, I've said this to you before, that like the word tennis empire keeps coming into my head, the two words.
Well, Tennis Addiction, before we sort of got a big following, when you typed it in, it used to come up under like 12-step plans and rehab and stuff like that.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah, okay, because of addiction.
Right at the beginning, yeah. But now it just comes up first as the tennis club in the area. But so we use the name. I leased the club for 5 years. I didn't have enough money to buy it or anything like that. And then after 5 years, I started thinking about, well, do I want to pay this enormous amount of money, or do I want to look at maybe building another club and moving somewhere else? And I went and talked to the landlord, and he said, well, why don't you just buy this club? I'll sell it to you. So I had no idea it would be for sale or anything like that. But now that I look back and what I know, it's not like a lot of people are leasing tennis clubs, because it's not easy. It's 45,000 square feet, and it's a lot of money. Per square foot, and it's not cheap, and it's hard to make a ton of money on a tennis club. You really have to love it, and you have to use it as a lifestyle and a community project, as opposed to like a cash cow, which it's
right.
not. So, but he gave me a good fair price, and it would have been 3 times as much to build a club. So I went to the bank. Because I'd been paying so much in lease money, when I got the mortgage, I would be like paying 2/3 of that. So the bank was receptive.
Oh, wonderful.
And then I saved some money. So it worked out really well. And here we are today.
And here you are. And that was in 2004.
2004, yeah. So I guess technically we've been in business since 1997. I've been there since 1987. I used to joke. So my dad worked at one company for 32 years, and I was like, especially in this day and age.
How can you do that?
Who stays at one company for 32 years? And then I look back, and I'm like, well, wait a second. If I add it up, actually, now I'm at 33. So I've been in the same place for 33 years.
Yeah, but it's different when you own it, when it's your baby. And honestly, I'm not saying it doesn't feel like work to you, because I'm sure it does at times, but there is such a fun, uplifting element to what you do, and there's different people coming through every day. It doesn't seem like something that's stagnant.
Well, no, that's the point. And all of the things that I get to do, it's not like I go and do the same job every day. Tennis Addiction runs programs at area country clubs. I was the president of the USPTA for 2 years, and I've been on the board for 10 years. We'll talk later about charity work.
Right.
But there's so many different things. This podcast or our next episode will have to do with music.
Right.
And some of the side projects that I've done, and the mentoring of young tennis pros, and the teaching of all the different people, adults, kids, beginners, advanced people, building the community. So it's not boring at all.
Right, it's a lot
years.
to keep you interested and motivated. Now, you have built this club on a few different pillars, and there's a very important people that helped with this. And the first name of mention is Scott Nickel.
Yeah, and so the interesting thing about Scott is that when I went to Pickering, when I was before I started working, so I started working when I was 27 years old at Tennis Addiction, which was called Lionville Nautilus and Tennis, and then later Lionville Sports Club. But it was called Pickering Creek Racket Club from 1972 to 1985 or something. And so it must have been like in 1982, I was just playing there, practicing there. And Scott Nickel was the pro. And it was just like a perfect fit for my brother and I to find somebody that was going to give us, put us on the fast track and teach us all the things. Sometimes you get come across.
You're all about the fast track.
Yeah, so sometimes you come across a teacher that's going to be giving it to you really quickly, and he was like that, and he got us up to speed so quick, and he's a brilliant teacher, and in later years, we brought him back to Tennis Addiction, and he came back, and at the time we had typical clinic is 4 to 6 people. And we
on the
court, on each court. And we had 5 courts, and we were putting 10, 12, 14, 16 people on a court, juniors and adults. And I just didn't know how to do it. I didn't know what drills to do. And we were coming out of a time where tennis was taught in a different way. People would stand in line and take their turn hitting the ball. And we had to change it. So he was brilliant. He just divided the group in half and put half on each side of the net. So if we had 12, we put 6 on each side. If we had 14, we did 7 on each side. And if we had 16, we put 8 on each side. And he devised all these drills for us to use that we still use until this day in large groups. And I'm actually doing in November at our annual conference, I'm doing a presentation on these drills. So we'll still be doing them today. Okay.
Well, gosh, that sounds really simple, but it's actually very innovative.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And that we did win an award putting that drill into a contest at a conference because people just didn't know what to do with that many people. And normally you would get a lot of pushback from students, but we didn't have that. And it turned into such a social atmosphere that the people liked to have more people. When they had less people, it wasn't as much fun. But in addition to that contribution, which was huge, telling us how to set up the court, and Scott would always say that, I was better behind the scenes, talking to owners and talking to banks and that kind of stuff and writing emails. He was brilliant on the tennis court. And he was particular about where he put the cart, where you stood, how you fed, every little detail. Like it was like a car inspection. We had a 100-point inspection. He had every little detail. And your normal tennis pro could go out and do the same thing and not even touch on, any of the points except the one of just feeding the ball. And Scott would have everything down to a science.
He sounds like he was really methodical and so thorough.
Yeah, he had a brilliant mind. He had an edge and plus he competed and he was a top player. So he had this edge that I remember he told me he played a tournament, and prior to the tournament, he drove to the club and measured all the nets to make sure they were the right height. and tested how hard, like tight they were in case a ball would hit and go over. I mean, he was crazy, and he had something called T-square rules, where if you were standing in a certain position on the court, you had to hit a shot to a certain position, and that's how he would coach you. He would keep track of that, and you know, he had all these crazy rules for when you played. Like you had to double fault twice in a game. I mean, in a match, you had to double fault twice because it meant that you were being aggressive. And he had just the most brilliant mind, and he's a great fisherman too. And he used to, you know, we used to go out on our breaks at lunchtime when I taught with him, and it would be like going to college, because I would sit in the car and just talk to him about fishing and about tennis. And
So he was a really big mentor to you.
yeah, he was. And the funny thing is, I think he's 6 months younger than me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
But it was funny because he was so much more knowledgeable in the tennis realm that I felt like the little baby, and he was like my dad as a tennis pro. But
Listen, you can learn things from people 20 years younger than you, and we'll get to someone like that in just a moment. But you know, the interesting thing about you, Anthony, is that you have a sense of vision. In addition to your God-given athletic ability and, you know, all of your talents, and you know how to put people together. So another person that became really important in your philosophy at Tennis Addiction was Emilio Sanchez.
yeah, and Emilio Sanchez is an ex-professional player, and I didn't know him. I never met him before, and I was at a conference in Marco Island, and I just went out and watched him. And you know, I've watched a lot of people give presentations, and you know, they're all over the board. Some of them are really good, some of them not so good, some of them are inspiring, some of them are just blah. But Emilio Sanchez would just like knocked it out of the park. It was amazing. So I took a picture with him. I took all the stuff back that I learned and I implemented at our club. And he does, they call it the Spanish way of teaching.
What is that?
Well, they have pillars, believe it or not, similar to Tennis Addiction. So they have a mental, a tactical, technical, and the big things that they talk about are footwork and heart. And they would say, like, you know, what percentage of a tennis player is heart, you know, and everybody would be guessing, and they claim it's 80%. So they're really big on the passion, and they're also, there's a sense of humor in the way that they teach. They include music. I don't know, it just had everything that I loved it. As soon as I saw the way that he was doing it, and I was like, I want to do it this way.
Now, does Rafael Nadal subscribe to the Spanish way, do you think?
He does, and actually Emilio coached him. And the funny story about that was that when they had the Davis Cup, they had Emilio Sanchez was the coach, and they had Nadal and another player that played on the team, and the other player like would have water bottles in a pile, towels everywhere, sloppy, bag everywhere. And Nadal, he's known for his water bottles, the labels had to face a certain direction.
Oh, he's OCD.
And he had, just to do a practice, it would take him 45 minutes to get ready with all the tape on his hands, on his feet. His headband had to be perfectly straightened out. And one time in a match, he was playing in a final, and one of the other players kicked his bottle on purpose to throw him off.
And did it?
It bothered him a little bit, and they almost got into a fight. And in addition to all those other things, he won't step on a line. You know, now during a match, you can't tell, but when he walks out,
really?
So if you watch him, he makes sure he doesn't. So anyway, he's like that way. And then, but he came up in the Spanish way of teaching.
How does that, you know, jive with your philosophy, the Spanish way?
Well, I thought when I went, so after I met him and after I got the initial dose, I signed up for the course. And you can go to any number of tennis courses, and they're usually like 9 to 4 with 2 hours off for lunch. You lay by the pool. And this particular one, so you started at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you ended at 7 o'clock at night with 45 minutes off for lunch, and they were sharp.
Wow.
And like a couple times, because I took the course twice, and I brought some of our staff down. A couple times, like I was out late the night before, and I'd have to take a break and like take a nap out, behind the conference room.
During the course?
Yeah, during the course. Well, the second time, because I already, I figured I wasn't going to miss anything. But I mean, it's a long time to go.
Yeah, it is.
11 hours or whatever that is, straight, and they just don't stop. And they go from in the classroom to on the court, and it's nonstop. And every little detail is addressed, which is sort of going to be a theme here with all the people that have influenced tennis addiction. It's been in the details. So, anybody could talk about you should do this, you should do that. Everybody knows, you should care about teaching, you should have passion. But to the attention to detail that these people followed. And Emilio Sanchez, they used to make fun of tennis pros that at the end of the day they would give a half-assed lesson because they were tired. And he would say, it's okay for you to do that, but you have to ask the people if they're okay with you charging them half price for the half-assed lesson that you're going to give. But it was that kind of like raw honesty, humor, passion. I mean, and then when we had different parts of the class that you would go to, and different teachers would take you, because he had somebody that did strength training, physical fitness, on-court footwork. And I kept my eye on him, and he was in the back room working on something. It wasn't like he took a break. So he actually, the example that he set and was crazy, and it just fit perfectly with me and my passion.
Right, because you pay attention to details, and it's funny. I think that's really what separates the good from the great. Even in like the entertainment business, you look at someone like Jim Carrey, who and Robin Williams, like their attention to detail is what makes them such brilliant comics.
Yeah.
Because it's they've thought it all through. They've practiced it all. It's like it's not they make it look random and spontaneous, but it's.
Well, a tennis addiction. So I'm well known and not well liked for this, but I don't like a tennis ball, a stray tennis ball. So I always talk about no tennis balls left behind, that kind of stuff. I don't want them behind the court. I don't want them anywhere. I don't want anything out of place. And my dad in the meat market, they cleaned everything spotless. And I have a friend, Steve Peretti, that used to run a restaurant. He would hide a rock. And when they cleaned, at the end of the night, if that rock didn't come out, they had to start over. So the thoroughness of that kind of stuff is the same way I am at tennis addiction. And I'm always talking about balls being left behind the court. And now they make fun of me. They take a ball, like we have orange and red, and I don't want anything mixed up. They have to be like in their own cart.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
and they'll put a red ball in my cart to be funny, that kind of stuff. So now but it's that attention to detail. Listen, I go to other tennis clubs, there's balls everywhere, and it looks terrible.
And it's a mess.
So
it looks like a mess. Well, speaking of, you talked about wanting, going twice to Emilio's clinic and whatnot. How do you keep tennis addiction cutting edge and fresh for instruction?
Well, there's always something new, and I have a friend of mine that works in business, and he always laughs at me because, I always say, listen, this is the new thing that I'm working on. And he's like, you're always working on a new thing, right, every day. Or I'll be like, this is the new, my new look, my new outfit that I'm working on, or this is my new idea, I'm going to go plant-based and eating. The thing is, the difference with what I do, that maybe not the same as like a Ralph Cramden from the Honeymooners, is I follow through on everything. So once I add it, I keep it in.
Okay.
So the Emilio Sanchez, he stays. And now he's a fabric. He left his mark at tennis addiction, as did Scott Nickel. And
so that brings us to the next young man who you coached at Malvern Prep, Dave DeLucia.
Yeah, so when I was younger, I was like, and we had the picture of the team with the coach, and you couldn't tell who the coach was, because I think I was like 24 and the kids were like 18. and I look kind of the same
Sure.
as they did. So, but he was my number one player, and he comes from a great family, and he didn't need to practice. There was nobody for him to practice with on the team, and he actually played every match for the team, won every match, and I just enjoyed watching him. And then years later, he went on the pro tour. He became a USTA national coach, one of 10 coaches in the nation, a prestigious position. And then he moved back to the area.
So what was his contribution? Because you ended up working with him at Tennis Addiction, right?
Yeah, so you know, again, I'm always looking to call somebody in and say, hey, can you take a look at our business and tell us what we're missing? And he came in right away, and the first thing he did was set a curriculum. And we had, you know, everybody has a curriculum. You work on ground strokes today and volleys tomorrow and this kind of stuff. But his was, we have 3 12-week programs, fall, winter, spring, and 11 weeks in the summer, each week being a separate session. So you're gonna have 3 12-week sessions. We wrote complete curriculum. It's a binder this big for developmental and tournament training. So the 2 different groups, almost 400 kids. And the attention to detail was incredible. We would rank everybody on the tennis court, every class. So you're talking about lots and lots of kids. You'd have 30 kids on a court, and you'd rank each of the courts 1 through 6. And then they'd have to slide back and forth based on their improvement. And then we went through the curriculum. And he really got us in order. And then he had a Davis Cup, which was now copied by area clubs. They use it. And Davis Cup was just like a cool team thing. He actually played Davis Cup.
Okay.
And he brought in his own, one of his trophies. And we used the Davis Cup trophy that we would pass around to the team that won. And Davis Cup, he just had 2 teams. They get a captain, they get a name, any kind of crazy name that they want, you know, from anywhere in the world. They make up their own name, and then they get points for these drills that they do. And the drills could be competitive, or they could be cooperative with the team. And the first one they get points for is how they tell you the name of the team. So they would all come up with like a skit. They would sing it, or they would like act it out. And then the pros would decide who got the points. And then at the end, he instituted so that it didn't matter how far one team was ahead than the other team. Instead of just saying this team won, there would be a chance to steal the Davis Cup. But the team that was ahead would have to offer to take that challenge. And of course, Dave, as brilliant as he was, he would encourage them to take that challenge, and they would have to do it. But the thing about Dave was he was brilliant. He was like Sherlock Holmes. I remember, and I loved working with him, and I learned so much from him, and I still use everything that I learned from him today. But he was another one. I mean, he took the attention to detail to another level. He was crazy. One time the lights went out at the club, and he put the flashlight on the phone, and we kept teaching, you know, things like that. I mean, he was just so clever. He has a degree in psychology, and he was like Mr. Rogers, Willy Wonka. Like he did all these, like, you know, and he had a Joker smile. He looked like the Joker. And then I remember one particular thing that we did that I enjoyed so much is that we had the lesson plan, like it's written out, pages and pages, and we would meet for 10 minutes before the class, and on one little like piece of paper we would just tear off. We would write the 7 things in order of what we would do, have the time next to it, and then we would roll it up and throw it out and go on a court and do it. And we always had, and we talk about Plan B. He had Plan B, C, D,
right.
E, F. So
well, it's an interesting pattern that you have of the people that are coming in that seem to have that quality in common.
Yeah.
Now, you brought Tennis Addiction, I heard, to Jamaica?
Yeah, and then, so the other thing is, I mean, the Tennis Addiction has become a brand that people trust. And, you know, at the beginning, somebody has to be the face of Tennis Addiction, and people get it wrong. I'm here in a service position for the general public, people to come in my club and the people in the community. And it just happens that tennis is my vehicle. But I sort of come off sometimes as like wanting to be the center of attention and being the person that's in all the pictures and everything. But I found over the years that that's not what I'm not trying to do that, but I had to do it.
Well,
And
that's part of it. That's part
Yeah.
of it for any business.
somebody had to be the face of tennis addiction. And so it just naturally became me. And then to brand it, I knew that I had to get some strong people in to build something that people could trust. And now it's funny because people come in, they're like, I really trust tennis addiction. You know, and we do a lot of different things now with, we have the NetGen compliant, which means that all of our staff are certified. So that includes like not one certification, that includes multiple certifications with 10 and under kids, with adults. You have to have background checks, clearances, AED, CPR.
Right, so everything is safe and
Yeah, and safety is number one. And the people, they're not going to bring their
and you've
their
been
kids to it.
commended for that. You've won. Tennis Addiction has received many awards. Didn't you receive the premier?
Yeah, so in 2013, they instituted a Premier Facility Award.
Okay.
And the USTA, and it's one of 12 private clubs. They pick 12 private clubs every year that win that, and we've won it for whatever it is, 8 years in a row. So we have all the banners up on, like the Boston Garden, we have all the banners up. And, you know, because of people like Dave and Scott Nickel and what they taught us, we've had 18 and under junior teams that went to the national championships in South Carolina. We had a team, a 3-0 lady, 3-5 ladies level that went to the actual final in Fort Lauderdale. And so we've had a lot of success.
Wow.
My high school team made it to the state championships, won the Chessmont for the first time in 22 years. And I really have to put it down to all of these things that Scott Nichols and David DeLucias and Amelia Sanchez have brought to us, because what they brought was a mindset of excellence. And you know, we brought in another guy, Mark Kovacs, who is sports science #1 in the United States. And you know, for anybody that's listening, and if they want to do something like this, all you have to do is call people up. I just called him. I didn't know him. You know, I asked him if he would come up. I would pay his way. I would pay any kind of fee. He didn't want a fee, but I paid him something. And a lot of times people don't even want a fee. They just want to help. And he came up and trained our staff. And it was another thing that we can reference. And I like to think that bringing these people to tennis addiction, they leave their mark at tennis addiction. It's worth more than when we go somewhere else and try to learn something and then bring it back.
Right. That makes
So-
sense. So okay, I want to get back just for a second, because you had said at one point that Swept Away also had an influence.
Oh yeah, so Swept Away.
That was
So-
in Jamaica.
Yeah, so the thing about that was just another phone call again out of the blue. And in like 1980s, they had these things where you could go as a visiting tennis pro. There was like a program that you would pay $200 and you could go to they would set you up and send you to a resort somewhere. And I didn't know where these resorts were. I didn't know if I would like the resort or anything, but I did hear about a new one opening up. And it was owned by Lee Issa, whose father was friends with Rat Pack and Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. And he built the first malls in Negril, Jamaica. And his son, who's a twin, his twin sister is a photographer, he built Swept Away. And Swept Away was, it's like a real Jamaican flavored club. It's not like, you know, hedonism or like a hotel chain. It's really Jamaican. And they also had a 10-acre sports complex, which had squash courts, tennis courts. They had tennis tournaments there over Easter. And so I just called up and they say, yeah, you can come, right? So I figured I'd go first without Betsy, just in case like I was putting a little shack somewhere or
Right.
something like that. And it turned out that I was like beachfront and I had a beautiful room and
Oh.
everything was paid for. So then I started taking Betsy down, and then I met Nancy Machado, who had a little son down there, and I became friendly with him, and I remember bringing him Legos every time I came down. And then I would stay at the owner's house, and he had a nice big mansion, and then we would go out on his boat. And it just, we brought tennis addiction. I brought Wassel, Kyle, Jeff, who we'll meet later, down to Jamaica. And now we went twice a year for 20 years, 40 times now, and you meet the same people, and they hear about tennis addiction, and then they, stay in touch, and then we meet them back down there again, and then we bring tennis balls down, and they say tennis addiction. So now every time I go down and teach, I'm teaching with tennis addiction balls, and it's been real nice to sort of get tennis addiction now as far as Jamaica.
Right. Well, that's really cool, Anthony. It's be nice to have a job where you could go to Jamaica twice a year. So the last pillar that I know is really important to you is your desire to give back. So how has that parlayed out into the community, in particular with the Camp Hills Special School?
Well, I mentor young pros, and they always ask, what do I need to do? And I like to keep things simple. That what I tried to do, and that's what Scott Nickel, Emilio, David, they just gave the juice. Like, they didn't give all the extra stuff. And with books, I'm the same way. Like, I don't really need to be explained an idea, ad nauseum for 30 pages. So I want this simple stuff. And so what I would tell the people that I mentor, these young pros, is, okay, you need this, 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 and this. Well, one of them is you have to get involved with a charity, and pick a charity that you like. In my case, and a lot of people are like, why would you do that? In fact, when I worked with charities at the beginning, people would be like, what are you doing, giving a whole day over, whatever. But to me, it never made sense. You had to do it. It wasn't like it was a question. You want to be involved. And so what I did something with American Red Cross, and they were great, but it's international, and you don't know where the money goes. And so I looked at things that I was really invested in, and I love kids. So I found Camp Hill Special School, which they are severely challenged mentally and physically kids, and it's a day school, it's an overnight school, and it's right here local in Glenmore. And so that was one of the big things. It was local. The money that we've raised over the last 20 years has helped them build a kindergarten and a wing on the school. And now most recently, at last year's gala, so what I did was I was the founder of, we started a gala/tennis tournament. And it started out with 75 people, and now they have.
Did you finally get to wear your tux, your formal tux to play tennis?
Yeah, I did. I did get dressed. I wore a sport coat, yeah. But and I always wear fancy outfits, and they look forward to that. But that was when I was younger. But they were so great, and it's such a good school, and the kids are so much fun. And I go and I spend time with the kids, so it's all that too. It's not just like I write a check and give it to them. We have they pick 10 to 12 kids that come to tennis addiction, and we give them a scholarship to be in our program. So we teach them tennis, and we've actually changed the pro-am into a tournament with the kids. So, and it's much better, and at the end of it, we'll sing with them, and like Bob Marley or something, and they'll sing with us.
That sounds sweet.
And,
how many years have you been working with
so
them?
it's been over 20 years.
Wow.
And at the beginning we raised $30,000, and now we're up to about $300,000 each year. And they just bought another farm, and they're doing a flower business. So that was last year's project, and now this year's is going to be virtual. The gala is coming up, but it's a virtual gala. But they've just been great, and what I'll do at the end of the day is, when I die, I will leave Camp Hill in my will, because it just the relationship has become so good and so entrenched. And Pico and Tennis Addiction were the first two sponsors, and then they were awarded, given an award for being the first two sponsors, and later on they picked some other businesses that have been supportive. But I've been there from the beginning. I'm proud of it, and it's just so much fun.
That's beautiful work, Anthony. I'm sure they really appreciate it, and you really touch a lot of people.
No, they appreciate it, but I got to say that I get more out of it than they get out of it.
I understand, yeah.
And that's just the way it is. And I always say that whenever they try to give me an award or try to thank me, what I get out of it is much more than what I give. And I'm embarrassed when they say how much I do.
I know, but it's true. But what you're saying is also true, that when you volunteer, it really can fulfill you more than you even realize. That you think, oh, I'm getting so much out of it, I feel guilty, but they're receiving too. So it is a reciprocal thing.
Especially if you're not doing it out of convenience, like only when you can help.
No, you're right. You're right. Yeah. Well, you're very selfless, Anthony.
Well, thank you. I hope everybody hears that.
Yeah, he's very selfless. So you mentioned that you had to be kind of the face of Tennis Addiction, but I understand that there's someone that you're passing the torch to in that arena, and that's Jeff Reitnauer.
Yeah, he's been with us. I taught him when he was 8 or 9 years old, and he's gone off and gone to college and pursued some other career opportunities, and he settled back at Tennis Addiction. And now I have the person that's at the right age to take over for me when I go off into the sunset, although I won't be doing that too soon.
So your kids aren't...
No, actually, my son and my daughter both work there, and Luke is just gotten certified as a tennis pro, and he's teaching about 15 hours a week, and he's very close friends with Jeff. So, maybe another podcast, Jeff will be talking to him about it.
I have a whole new appreciation for you, Anthony. You're fantastic, and as I said before, selfless. Yes, he's selfless. But I'm going to look forward next week to talking some music to you.
All right.